How's everybody doing? Last session. Yay. Okay, let me pin Katie and Hannah.
Hopefully it's the last hot weather weekend we have for a little bit.
Oh, yeah. It's a little warm.
It's a little warm today again.
Yeah.
So you have your back-to-back, your next 2 sessions you're teaching as well, correct?
This is the last session for this class, and then it's gonna roll into the next class the same time.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and then after that, the third class. So I finished about week 13.
Okay.
So that will take care of the whole certificate. And then so then I will have 3 weekends that I actually don't work, but there's always something going on. Okay.
I really enjoyed this class. I feel like I've learned a ton myself.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. We are going to do a summer one. I had talked to the dean, and hopefully I can recruit some of the students, including your student, for the summer. We're gonna try to do it in spring, but we'll see how the schedule's gonna go.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. I think mostly everybody is here. I'm looking at, yeah. I don't think everybody is here yet. But we'll start in a minute. Give yourself some time to download. Okay. Okay, everybody. So today is the last session that we are going to hold for this class. And if you register for CIS824B, that will start next week. And CIS824C, that will start after that, which is 5 weeks after. Okay, any question? Oh, no question for now. Okay, so I have to post your grade by the 24th of September. I originally assigned it on the 25th for all your work this week, but I'm unable to do that as I have to submit my grade and attendance. So make sure all your work gets submitted by the 22nd, which gives me 2 days to get everything finalized. Okay? All right. So let's talk about what we need to do today. I know that we left off some materials from last week, so I'm going to revisit that and finish that up from assignment 3. And then we'll finish the assignment for week 4. Okay, any question? Okay, so if you can open your week 3 assignments that you didn't complete, and then we'll go through it together. So we left off with number 20 in week 3 assignments. And maybe at 21, but I'll go over 21 again. Okay. So in week 3, we talked about troubleshooting devices. So on number 21, it says Tanya heard loud clicking noises as she's using the PC. What advice would you give her to fix the problem? And I put down in that loud clicking noise is typically a repeated rereads of defective disk surface. So that means that when the read-write head touches the platter inside the drive for the HDD, it causes failure. So you don't want the read-write head to touch, and that can be wear and tear over time. So this is typically a sign of a failing drive. So you would tell Tanya to replace the hard disk drive. But before that, we want to make sure that we create backups for her drive and then install the new drive and transfer the image and the files over. So this typically it all depends on how much data Tanya has. So it could go from a few hours to longer. Sometimes people would have a large set of data, and you have to create a copy of that. So I would personally copy all the important files to an external drive, like a USB or a hard drive. And then I would try to create an image from that drive so I can keep the application for her. Then I would take that image and use that on the new hard drive. Then I would put back all the files. So as you can see, technician would charge quite a bit just for replacing hard drive. And we will talk about OS today, okay? For 22, it asks, Mark installed the new SATA hard drive in his computer, but it is not recognized by the operating system. How should Mark do to troubleshoot? What should Mark do to troubleshoot the problem? So pretty simple. Mark should simply shut down the computer, disconnect the power, reconnect the power and the data cable to test if it's a power issue or the cable issue. Then if that doesn't lead to anything, then with the computer on or reboot the computer, access BIOS or UEFI and determine if the drive is recognized there. Now, if it is recognized, then we can format the drive for use. Okay, possibly that the drive is not formatted or something had happened to the file system on that drive. Okay, knowing that every storage, in order to be seen by the operating system or the system, usually you would have to have some form of file system. And a file system is a way that the file would be organized logically and physically on that disk. And we'll talk more about this later on. Okay, any questions with 21 and 22 from week 3? For 23, it asks you, Anna recently installed Windows 10 in her PC. When she restarts the computer, the monitor displays OS not found message. What should Anna do to fix the problem? So that would be a corrupted boot sequence on the actual hard drive. And there would be a few causes in this, right? Common cause, you would find that it could be a Trojan, which is a malware that would delete boot files, or possibly through the use or even manufactured hard drive could cause that section of the disk not to be read. So first, we want to remove all non-bootable USB on the older operating system. This tends to cause the issue. Second, we would restart the computer and access BIOS or UEFI to set the proper boot sequence to the primary drive that has the operating system, which is Windows 10. Okay, so two things that we need to take care of first. First, we want to unplug all the non-bootable USB, because if the BIOS is set to boot to those devices, it's not going to detect operating system and it's going to send that message, especially if you're looking at older operating system. Then we want to restart the computer and check the setup in BIOS or UEFI. Then we want to set it to the primary drive that would store the OS. And in BIOS and UEFI, it should give you the drive information. Okay. So you would select that drive and set that drive as priority. So let me go back up in case you're still writing down the answer. Any questions so far?
No.
Yes. No question?
No, I said no.
Okay. All right.
So I have a question.
Yes, Michelle.
I guess if the operating system, the gigabytes used to run from that operating system is larger than the memory space available on a laptop, I guess obviously it wouldn't run, right?
What do you mean by larger? Like as in the bit size for the operating system require less?
Well, like
Or
I think I had a USB bootable drive that was 30 gigabytes.
okay.
And the only way I could, and then I have this cheap old laptop that only had like 8 gigabytes free.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that I wasn't able to run the bootable drive because I didn't have enough storage space on the laptop.
You can. So if you're booting from the USB externally, like to run an OS on that external USB, then you point to it. The internal memory is only used by the native operating system to really ask for applications and resources for allocation. So if you're booting to the USB and use the internal memory for the OS on the USB, depending on the operating system on that USB. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today, because if you're running 32-bit, it's limited you to a certain amount of RAM, like 4 gig, where if you're running 64-bit operating system, you can have higher RAM size to be able to allocate. And then this is why on the older operating system, most of the time you would see an older laptop like that would be sold with 2 gig of RAM or 4 gig of RAM, because 32-bit operating system, the file system used for those OS would only be able to access up to 4 gigabyte, like 3.94 gig of RAM allocation with the memory. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we'll talk about formatting external drive down in a little while. Any other questions? Okay, so we talked about Anna fixing her computer, restart, remove, configure BIOS. Okay, for 24, it says describe the purpose of self-monitoring analysis reporting technology SMART in the featured hard drive. So when you purchase a hard drive and you see the detail or one of the feature listed as SMART, this is what it's used for. It's used to detect drive temperature in case it runs hot. So it should give you some kind of temperature indicator. It's used to read retries. Now, all hardware devices would reattempt the way it's designed now with the newer technology. So in the case if it reads and fail, and if it needs to retry, it would keep a log of that. It would be used in the case where it's slow to start up or spin up. In the case of physical HDD, right, the mechanical hard disk drive where the platter spins, if it's spinning slow to start, it would keep a log of that. If there are many bad sectors on the platters or on the track, it would also keep track of that. And if you have drive failure that's intermittently shows, right, sometime when it writes to different part of the drive and it's unable to do that, it would send a warning and those warning would be logged. So this is why sometimes people would pay more money to get a hard disk drive, HDD, that would include SMART, okay? Now, if you're looking back in time, years ago, this feature would cost a lot more than what you see today because we have better technology like solid state drive. But with the SMART on the HDD, that would be useful if you're looking to monitor a reliable system. For example, servers, right? Essential computing system for businesses. So this would be something that we want to look at as a feature on hard disk drive. And why is it important in troubleshooting is that when we troubleshoot, we should also look at the logs that's generated from SMART, right? Is it running hot? Does it have a lot of attempts in read? Is it slow to start? Are there many bad sectors on the drive? So we need to replace the physical drive? Are there a lot of failure warning that's generated? Okay. So now when I teach forensic, this is one of the area that we look at as well, because when we investigate a system, we usually have to look at storage, smartphones or computer. And so if it has an HDD with SMART, we will look at the logs and see what's happening with that drive. Okay. Any question? Okay, so those are the things, and of course you can find all of this online.
Question,
Yes.
is that put on the packaging of the hard drive so you know that it has SMART?
Yes. And when you look at retailer website, it will tell you if you're purchasing a hard disk drive HDD, it will tell you whether it has SMART or not. SMART. I've seen many. So, okay, any other questions? Okay. For 25, it asks you, Felipe is setting up a presentation in a conference room using his laptop and projector. He's unable to see any image on the projector. What should Felipe troubleshoot how should Felipe troubleshoot the issue? So one of the common position in the field is media tech or AV tech, right? Meaning that you will set up a lot of the equipment, could be for courtroom presentations. So if you ever watch like C-SPAN channel, or even some of the shows where people go into the court, and if when they have a trial, and you would see there they use computer and projection to show, right, crime scene, or in the case where if you ever see checkpoint, right, when you're driving through town, uh, technicians actually get dispatched to install printers. So when they catch people with DUI, right, they would print out the information before the arrest. They would have, portable reader to scan your driver license and such. So those reader need to have access to wireless. So you would have technician to be able to install that. And then in conferences, you would have AV technicians or technicians that set up equipment. So this is a common position in the field. I did some field work and I had to set up large conferences things too, network and appliances and security appliances. So this is a common case. So when Felipe set up the presentation on the laptop, and he cannot see anything on the projector, first thing I recommend is to check to see if the lens cap or the shutter is covered, and that's a common mistake, that people turn everything on and they forget that the projector lens cap is still covered, so they see black. And so simply open that, right? It seems very obvious, but it's common. Okay, so when they call me and they said, oh, this is not working, I tell them to check that first. Check the power connection, right? All right, second thing, check the image source selection. So use the menu option on the projector to, or press the button for the input. And that's a common mistake, is that when people plug the cable in specific input, they don't select that. And so they see nothing from another input, then they think it's a problem, okay? For 25, the third thing we want to make sure is we want to check if the computer is configured to use projector as extended. And you can do this on Windows 10 with settings, right? Or real quick, I'll show you on mine. Let me minimize everything. So here's my desktop. And then if you right click, and then you can go to display settings. So this, if you go to settings and choose display, you would see that as well. So this would take me here. And then from here, what you can change is you can change the layout of your display. And if you are using multiple display, in the case of Felipe, you would try to detect another display because he's using his screen and the projection screen. Okay, so this is where you would configure, and also it gives you the option in advanced display settings and graphic settings. So if I go into graphic settings, I can have it where it would be in specific performance preference, right? And it all depends to, some adapter actually comes with its own software. And then you can also make sure that you change the options, since I'm not connected, but you can change the options on how the projection would be an extension of your computer. So that way it would have the proper display showing up. And so this is how you can change that on Windows 10. And another way that we can get in is through control panel. And through the control panel, right, we can also access other devices and our systems. So this is another way that we would get into our hardware and sounds. And then here you can select. So in the case of display, the easiest I would recommend is to use settings. Now, Windows 10 gives you the option to right click the start button and you can choose settings there, or you simply choose type in settings, okay? And that will take you here. Or if you want display settings, just right click desktop and display settings. So there are many ways that we can access the settings itself to be able to reconfigure, but you know, we just have to find one good way to really get there. Now, if you test for Microsoft certifications, you have to know different ways. Question?
Here you go. Quick question. What are the two technician titles that you mentioned?
AV Tech, A/V technicians. I've seen it posted for Cal State San Bernardino and other local businesses. And then you can also find it under Media Field Tech.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Or sometimes they would just be called level 1 service technician or level 2 service technician. Now, some of them you have to be certified for certain brand, right? And through that, you would see it in the job description. So for example, like HP service technician, they require that you are certified for HP equipment, or Xerox, they would do that, but they can give you that through their training. Okay. Okay. Any other question? All right. No questions?
Nothing related to this one, but can I see number 23?
Sure. Real quick, I'll flip back to 23. So 23, we want to say remove non-bootable USB, restart the system and access BIOS to set boot sequence to the hard drive.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question.
Yes.
If I connect an external monitor, I can get audio out of the external monitor when I switch it in the settings. But for some reason, when I use Zoom and I switch to the, I connect the HDMI cable to the external monitor, I can never get the audio to come out of the external monitor. It just comes out of my main laptop.
Yeah, Zoom does system, it uses the native onboard audio when you click same as system, because the secondary, the monitor becomes a secondary, and it would always, the way Zoom app is written, it reverts to the primary audio, which is your onboard audio. So now even if you try to set it, you gotta make sure, because you gotta make sure that you check in your device manager on Windows 10 to see if it sees it as an audio device, for one. Second, to make sure that the drivers are appropriate. They built the application this way for security reasons. So that way, you don't get interjection with, some another source coming in with a second sound or a third sound. So
Oh, thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so we were talking about 25, that we want to make sure that the projector is configured as an extension of the desktop. You can also mirror it so that way it would see. Now, I had played with this a little bit with the VR system like Oculus Rift. So if you have a good video adapter and you wanted to project on your monitor what the people is seeing in the Oculus Rift, you can also connect, you would use two separate cable to connect to that particular display adapter. And then, you would configure that monitor in Windows 10 in the settings to mirror the actual VR system. So you can see the image that the person is seeing on the goggle itself in 2D, of course. It won't be in 3D on the monitor. So you can do it that way as well. If it has multiple adapter, or on your adapter, it would have multiple connections. Okay. And then lastly, we want to make sure that we check power cable and video cable. So I normally would do that first before, right after I check the lens cap. But, when you go through, you would remember we talked about troubleshooting steps, right? We would look at, some of the options as far as what would be the issue. Okay. So check lens cap, check image source selection, which is your input, check configuration for the monitor extension or the projector extension in your Windows settings or the laptop settings, and then check power and video cables. Okay. For 26, it says, what are the causes of display artifacts? So, the causes would be overheated GPU or projector, overclocked GPU, overcompressed graphics, overcompressed video, low resolution video, image enlarged higher than the resolution of the display. So anytime that you utilize the graphic processor unit, GPU, more than its capability, you would have some kind of reaction, right? The system will tell you that it's running into problem. And if you're overclocking it, meaning that we would crank it up to faster speed than it could process, like turbocharging your motor, right? And if you do that all the time, it would cause heat, it would cause wear and tear. So we would see the issues in display problem. And then in the case where sometime you would see applications that utilize compressed graphics, right, or compressed video, then you would run into that problem. Any question? Okay. So for 27, it asks you, how do you troubleshoot flickering issue on the laptop LCD monitor? And you see this more frequent with regular monitor, right? Like your television or your projection monitor. And in the case of the laptop, if you start seeing flickering, first check your driver so we can update the driver. So how do I do that? We would simply, on Windows 10, I'm illustrating, of course, you can search for Device Manager. This keeps a list of all your devices in the system. And then whatever type of devices you have, it would list it under each of the category. So here is my display adapter. You often see that near the middle. So you click the arrow to expand and it drops down. So I'm using a laptop that has an onboard display through, or the display built into the processor itself, and then it has an added graphic. So if I wanted to update the driver for the added graphic, I simply select it, right click, and choose update driver. And what that will do is it's going to ask me if I have this a storage location where it would find the driver, or it can search for it using internet connection. Now, by default, Microsoft generic driver can be used. However, right, we want to utilize the appropriate driver for our graphic adapter to maximize the capability for that adapter. So again, what I did was I simply search for device manager, and you can do this several ways. You can access it by right-clicking start button, or search for it, or through control panel. Once I found it, I simply open it and it takes me here. And then I expand the category for that hardware, and then I choose it, and I can choose update. But you can, if you need to disable it, you can choose disable or uninstall. So there are multiple options for you to select from there. Okay, so if you see an exclamation point, a yellow exclamation point, or a red X, right? The red X means that it's disabled or not functional. And the exclamation point means that it doesn't have the proper driver, which allowed the operating system to utilize that hardware appropriately. Okay, so we want to make sure that we check our devices. So anytime you install a new adapter or any new device, you want to check and make sure that it has the right driver. Okay, even though, right, Windows would do a lot of this for you, the OS, but we should use the driver. Now you can download it from the manufacturer website. You can look at, if it's a laptop, you can look at the model. They have all the support drivers on that model, so you can go and find it and download it. Okay, so this is why when you become a service technician or you work as one, you need to have a wireless adapter so you can quickly connect to the internet if need be to download things. Okay, any question?
There was a question on chat. I don't know if you can see it.
Let me see. Where would you look to find the hidden object BT and other created in PAN? Are you referring to personal area network?
Go back to chat messages.
Oh, okay. Network BT. Hitting BT for the devices. Okay, so if you're looking at personal area network though for the wireless, you would, so the easiest way is to run network monitor, and I'll touch on this after answering these questions because it's a different topic, and I can share with you some of the tools on how you can scan. That's a totally different area, but yeah, in your computer system, you would use a third-party application to be able to scan that, because with the hidden objects, it pertains to, you know, entity that could be, or created or added devices. on the actual wireless itself. So you can go into the router or you can use a third-party software tool to be able to do that. Okay. And that is more on the security class, which is 824C, and the next class. So I'll come back to that. How do you troubleshoot flickering? We want to check driver. We also want to check failing inverter. We touched a little bit on this last week on how if you look closely at the screen and you see little grain of text that's grayish on your black screen, right? That shows that could be the inverter problem or the black light issue. So you can, if you start seeing that, then the backlight and the inverter could be failing. So you want to check for those things. And then in the case that if the inverter or the backlight is failing, you can replace the inverter or you can replace the monitor. Okay. For 28, it asks you, what should you do to avoid persistent image on LCD monitor and on plasma monitor? So persistent image is often referred to as burn-on image. That means that, let's say that I have a picture of my family as a screensaver on the background of my computer and on the screen, and I would keep it there for a long time. And when I go to look at other windows, open other windows, I would still see a little bit like an ingrained image or a shadow of that picture of my family, then that would be considered as persistent image. So you would use screensaver or LCD for LCD monitors, so that way it changes, right? It changes the image instead of using one type of image. So you want to frequently change the background image so that way it doesn't burn onto the monitor. You should also change to full screen or use wash screen software tool to really clean that up. So what that does with the plasma is it actually change up the pixel that's showing, right? The images that's showing, so that way it's not ingrained onto the actual background of that screen. So we would use screensaver, and we would change our configuration for our open window to full screen or use wash screen clean feature on plasma. You don't see plasma anymore. Plasma screens are made of glass. It uses more power, and it is a little warmer when you turn it on, but you might see it in maybe businesses when they're still using it to project certain things. It's been around for a while. So plasma screen was common because it was back then became available right around LCD. It was more available back then near the beginning of LCD. Okay. For 29, it asks you, a client complains that his smartphone cannot be charged. What can you do to help this client? Right? So we touched on cable before for charging, right? Different type of USB cable. So first we want to make sure that the charger is rated for the phone. We want to check the charging port on the device, because sometimes that could be residue, dirt, goo, I call it, over time, right? People could touch that part of the connection and leave residue there, which caused it to not have complete connection to all the pins, like lint. Okay. Check ports that are susceptible to dust or debris. Okay. And you don't have to write all of them down, but I want to give you the things that you should check. Check if the charger has a toggle for different devices like iOS and non-iOS, and make sure the right setting is selected. If you're using the USB port on a laptop or on the computer, enable USB fast charging. So that way it can use power through USB. Otherwise, on the older system, you can't power through USB hub. Okay. If you have checked these issues and there's no success, check the cable. So how do we do that? We would use a good known cable. So if you have a second cable, you would connect it. So simple, right? Check ports, check connection on the phone, check cable. And you don't have to put verbatim for your answer. I just want to make sure that these are the things that you should look at when you're troubleshooting non-charging devices when you connect it. And so if there are debris, you can use, right, alcohol to clean it, but make sure that everything is dried before you plug anything in. Okay. And when you clean it, don't plug it in, right? Make sure power off. Any question with 29? So an important thing that the notes pointed out here for you is that you can't charge your smartphone from an unpowered USB hub because it has less than the power that would be distributed to that port. So not all USB are powered, right? Some of the older system you cannot power through that. So lately you start seeing more capability with when you know power through USB, but not all of them are like that. So make sure you check. Any question? Okay, for 30, Gary asked you to help him troubleshoot his tablet. A few apps are not able to load. What would you do? Sorry, I had a grammar error here. Do to help Gary troubleshoot this issue. Okay. So likely that there's storage issue when it deals with apps. Okay. So first we want to make sure that we check storage space. So when you're working with iPad and things that only use internal storage, you should check your storage, the internal storage. Okay. So if it's close to the maximum, there's a certain allocated space, right, for the storage, let's say 64 gig, and it's already at like 63 point something, likely the apps won't run. Okay. So if it's close to the max, it's not going to run. So what do we need to do? We need to uninstall some of the apps. Okay. You should uninstall apps anyways, things that you don't use, because if you let it sit there, right, there will be other security issues. Something else can utilize that app to access other things, because likely your apps would access photos, contacts, internal content, files of your device. Most apps would utilize, camera, microphones. So that means that it can listen in, it can turn on the camera to see what's happening, right? So because you have to allow that in order for the app to run. So if you don't use a certain app, uninstall it. Number one, it frees up the space on your device so you can use it for other things. Number two, it enhances the security, right? So that way other things don't capitalize on those apps that are being unused. Also free up processing power too. So your performance for your system would also be more stable if you free up some of the resources. Okay. And then in some cases, we need to close some apps because it might still be running. For web enhanced app, meaning that it needs to connect to the internet, make sure the device has stable internet connection. So maybe if it's not loading is because it's looking for internet connection. And if it doesn't have internet connection, it will not load appropriately. Okay. Any question? So when we troubleshoot now, right, if you work as a technician, you would see that you have to troubleshoot all devices. Sometimes game console, right, which is a computer. Sometimes smartphones, tablets, IoT, like smartwatches. Okay, for 31, it asks you, in mobile devices, what is the cost of a swollen battery? Overcharging. So what do I look for when I feel that there's a swollen battery? Especially on laptop, when you plug the battery in and it doesn't seem to fit physically to that space, like when you try to slide it in or snap it in, and it keeps popping out because it's offset a little bit, that means that it swells up in the physical size, okay? My former students, they tell me that Chromebook has this common issue when people charge it too long. Okay, so overcharging will cause swelling of the battery, and that creates damage to the battery or even the system. So on the Chromebook, the battery lays right near the hard drive, and so when it swells up, it pushes against the hard drive and eventually it damages the hard drive. So you would see some of the cases like that. Okay, so charge it to full, unplug it, make sure that, so that way your battery will last. Use it until close to depletion, charge it full, use it. That way you have a good cycle for the battery. Any question?
Yes, I was told one time by when I had the iPad 1 and the battery got swollen, that he said that it could explode.
Yes, and if it touches something conductive, yes. And you do see some cases like that, but it has to cause heat or touch conductive components within. So it depends on where it physically actually touches or sit inside your case. So, yeah, you do see some, and a lot of the fire and explosion is caused by heat issues or conductive issues.
Wow, well, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
So your best way is just to charge it to the fullest, and like you said, wait until it's almost gone. My daughter's
Yeah.
used Chromebook for school.
Yeah. And this is what I heard from a few of my students that does service Chromebook for school districts. They tell me that because the teachers, they leave them in charging over the weekend or overnight too long. So what happens is it causes the swelling in the battery on some of the models. And then that causes it to push against other devices. On some model, it pushes against the RAM, but the majority that they see is that it pushes against the hard drive. And then also you can tell too when you sit it down on a flat surface and it seems like it's wobbly back and forth, that means that it's uneven on the bottom. There's a cause of swell underneath in the middle. So that's because of overcharging.
Okay, good. That's a good tip. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, we're almost done with 3, and then we'll move on to 4. I want to keep it a little lighter today, so week 4 is shorter. Okay, 32. When assembling mobile devices, how should you organize the parts? Okay, this is some of the tips that you should follow. Use plastic divided compartments lidded tray for hardware to keep screws, bolts, and small parts. Okay, and you can find a lot of these at dollar store, right? They sell these little container that has a subcompartment, okay, where you can put screws, sometimes clips, different small parts. As you put each set screws into the compartment, add a label to indicate which sub-assembly they go to. So maybe use a small post-it or some sticky note and write down right where that is, okay, in the system. Place plastic sensitive materials like CPU, RAM in anti-static bag or on anti-static mats. And you can find the mats between $10 to $20 online. If you don't have the mats, when you open up computer devices that are sold in boxes, keep those anti-static bags. I actually bought a bunch of anti-static bags for my forensic class because I intend to ship out some storage for them so they can investigate what's on those storage. So, you can find ESD bags by the bulk or even a few, like 5 for a few dollars, in different sizes. So, but make sure we touch metal surface to brand ourselves, and don't put CPU RAM on metal surface. Make sure it goes into anti-static area and non-metal surface, okay? Use anti-static bubble wrap for larger components such as motherboard, or use boxes or to protect case and trim components. Because as you disassemble, you would have the board, right? If you don't have a large enough anti-static bags, you can try to use bubble wrap so that way it doesn't have things dropped on it. You can use boxes to protect the case because those are pretty flimsy once you take them apart. They could snap or break. and trim components. Now, earlier in the class, the week 1, you guys asked me about tool sets, right? So the tool sets that you acquire, think about how you would use that. Some of the later tool sets, I don't think I have the one that MVC has, but it comes with more pieces for tablets and smartphones. Like it would have suction cups to be able to pull things apart, or little smaller pliers. So you can take a look at the toolkit that would repair tablets and smartphones. Or you can buy that subset separately for a few dollars too. Or look at how to put together those pieces from, buying individual tool. I think that's more expensive than buying the toolkit, but you can assemble it over time. Any questions? Okay. I think that's it for week 3, if you don't have any questions. The notes contain a lot of great useful information for CompTIA A+ certification, or just to practice. Okay? So yes.
I just wanted to see, can you go back to 1 through 5 just to look?
Here is 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. I got that. And what was
Okay.
the rest?
And then here's 4 and 5.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Other questions? So you recall that we did a team activity earlier in the class, right? And I told you that I would look at the answers, and they were all great. So I couldn't make a decision on which team would get all the prizes. So I have a game that's going to come up, at the end of the class. So with that, what you can do is you can use that game in place of a quiz this week to assess your understanding of week 4 material, and you can win a prize with that game. Okay? It's a very short game and it's fun, right? Some of my students are taking this class when they had my other classes, they know. But I will share the link and the information on how to use that game. Okay, so we'll do that at the end. Okay.
Can I see number 7 just real quick? Sorry.
7. Here's 7.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, so if you finish week 3, right, save your file, and then you can upload it to Canvas. Make sure you submit it so that way you can get credit for it. Let me save that. Okay, next I'm going to go into week 4. So this week we are going to touch on operating systems, and mostly we're going to touch on Windows OS because there seems to be more configurations and troubleshooting requirement with Windows operating system. And for the CompTIA A+, if you plan to take that, you would have to know quite a bit about Windows OS and then some other OSs as well. Okay, so let's talk about 32-bit versus 64-bit operating systems. So every operating system requires file system. It's the way that data would be organized physically on the drive and logically on the drive. So on your storage drive, like your hard drive, a file can be organized in one location or many area or many parts of the drive. Okay, so for example, you save your document for this class, that could spread across different part of the drive. And the system would use addresses inside that drive to be able to locate where that file is. And it would also have a mapping table to really identify where that file is located on your drive. So let's think about that, right? An analogy for this is like how you can have one person that can live in multiple houses on the street, okay? And in order to find this individual, we would use a map to locate which house that this person could be in, right? This person could be in the house 1 and house 3 and house 4 and house 5. So when your system pull a file, what it does is it's gonna map it to specific address, location of the drive where it would store that file. Okay, so it could be 5, 6, 10 location or more, depending on how big or small is that file. Okay, and in the physical aspect is that a file could be put in many sectors on the hard disk drive. Okay, in the flash environment, it can put it into many slots on the chip. Okay, so let's say that I can have it in sector 1, sector 15, sector 25, wherever. And in that case, your file is fragmented, meaning that it's spread across the storage. And why do they do this? It's because it's fast to write. Whatever the available space, it's going to throw the file in, pieces of the file. Okay. So when you open up a file, what you see is your system is going to pull it from different places, and it's going to bring it forward using the application to show it to you, right? Using RAM, processor, and storage, monitor, keyboard, and other components as well, okay? So it's a way that we organize file, and one system would be different than other, okay? So let's think about that. Like, let's say that you are organizing your clothes drawer differently than your other family members, right? They might have socks separately compared to shirts. And then you would have things that are combined, like, you know, socks and shorts, whatever, right? So, and every operating system have different type of file system, ways that it would organize the file. So what does that mean for us, right? What it means is that how the files can be accessed, retrieve, read, and write, meaning that we can see and we can store. How efficiently we can use the storage, which is the drive itself, and how secure it is in the system. And that's important, okay? And people argue about this. Mac OS is better than Windows OS or Linux OS because it has different functionality. But ultimately, when you drill it down, it's down to the file system itself. And then there are factors like design and interface and tools. Okay. So for a file system, in Windows environment, we would see different type of file system being implemented in their operating system over time. So the original, when you go all the way back to Windows 95, which is before before 1995, of course, right? That was FAT 12 and FAT 16. FAT stands for File Allocation Table. So think of it like a list of how it would identify where the file is located. Okay. Like the analogy for this would be I would have a seating chart for all my students in class, and I would know exactly who sits where, right? So if I need to give an assignment back to the student, I can quickly go to that seat and then give it back to that student. So the system would do that, right? Windows system for the file allocation table, it creates a table so it tracks it tracks which address would be correlated to that file. Okay. So in that, over time, what we needed was we needed larger allocation of files because we don't just use small files anymore. We use video files. That's large. We use image file. That's large, right? We use audio file. That's large. So the number that you see next to FAT just indicate the bit size. So when you see FAT, that goes back to FAT 16, which is 16-bit. FAT 32 is for 32-bit. exFAT is for 64-bit. And NTFS came around since Windows NT. That stands for New Technology File System. And NTFS is a little bit different than FAT. It's still a way to organize your file, but NTFS have other sub-file system that's built in for security. Okay, so here it gives you the breakdown on FAT. Okay, if you're looking at the FAT 32, which is what we currently use today, and exFAT, you can have this many address size, 2 to the 32 power. Okay. And each entry could indicate that, you know, so I can have many addresses that would tie to that file. So in your C drive, right, you would have system files, you would have, you know, application files, and, you know, everything. So every operating system would have some form of root directory, a container, a section of that drive, right, that would store the main component of that operating system. With FAT32, the largest unit that it can create, right, the largest, so it uses allocation unit size. Each of the unit for in that table could be up to 16 gig. Okay, so what does that mean? My one file could be in one entry and other files would be in the larger aspect exceeding that size. So it can go from 8 kilobyte to 16 gigabyte. Okay. Okay. So this is FAT32 information. Now, very important, individual files can go up to 4 gigabyte. Okay. So the way FAT32 is organizing is that the file itself, it can support up to 4 gigabyte. So this is why we transitioned to 64-bit, so that way we would, number one, have better performance in the system. Number two, have larger files, right? If you think about when you game or when you create a video, your files are a lot larger, okay, than just 4 gigabyte. With FAT32, you cannot assign permissions to, there's simple permissions in share, but you cannot assign user permission to the file. So it lacks security. You can upgrade, right, over time, but every time that you upgrade your OS, when you change your file system, it requires reformatting, and reformatting requires, rewriting the file system. So you have to back it up, format, and then transfer the file. 64-bit system has compatibility backwards to 32, but 32-bit system cannot have forward compatibility, meaning that if I have a 32-bit system, I cannot run 64-bit application. I can have a 64-bit system. I can run 32-bit application, and many of you already know this, okay? But compatibility is important, okay? Any question with this? So exFAT is FAT64. This could be used for Windows 10. This could be used for your flash drive, right? This could be used for your storage media, internal hard drive. All that is it's a FAT allocation table for 64-bit size, which allows us to have larger files and have larger drive. Okay. Often you would see mobile device storage media like your SD and your USB flash drive come pre-formatted with 64-bit exFAT. Okay. Because it's able to support larger drives, right? So when I buy a 1 terabyte USB flash drive, the expectation is that in the firmware of that drive, that automatically, it plug and play, so it runs that firmware, is that it would be formatted with exFAT. And exFAT is compatible cross-platform to Mac OS and Linux. This is why when you buy USB drives or external hard drive, you can plug it into different OS. There's one file system that works across. Okay, that's seen by other operating systems. Okay, any question? So exFAT, we can have up to 512 terabyte, which is the maximum recommended volume size. So I can section a drive up to 512 terabyte. You know how large that is? Most of the time in a regular common system, you see maybe 4 terabyte, a few terabytes, right? But if you're looking at server scales, 512 terabyte is large, okay? So you can store a tremendous amount of files on there. So that means that I can create a section in the drive for 512 terabyte, okay? That's the maximum volume size. And I can run OS, right? But some of the current OS for commercial use is not able to scale to that really yet, right? But theoretically, we're supposed to go up to 64 zettabyte. ZB stands for zeta, and 1 zettabyte equals to 1 billion terabyte. Imagine that. So now, why is the need for this? Every upload that you make on social media, right? Every tweet that you tweet, right? Everything that you do on social media needs to be stored somewhere. So for an account that been very active over time, let's say for the last 20 years on Twitter, Instagram, well, Instagram has been around that long, but Facebook been around pretty long, right? Let's say 10 years. Image, video, posts, comments, you know, all these things that ties to the user needs to be stored somewhere. And in that scale, if you're scaling out to millions and billions of users, you see there's a need for zettabyte. Okay. So in a larger scale, you see this. So the maximum file sizes for exFAT is 512 terabyte. It can go up directly to 64 zettabyte. Commercial use, like for your consumer system, you don't really see the scale, but on server scales, you see much larger drives. Okay. Okay, so let's answer the first question. Let me go back up. So what type of file system that are used for Windows operating system? FAT32, we're talking about more modern Windows operating system, right? Current. FAT32, NTFS, EXFAT, and CDFS for optical. That means you can run stuff from the CD for boot. Okay, 2. What's the maximum logical partition size for FAT32? We just touched on this, 2 terabyte. So if you format your hard drive or your SSD drive using FAT32 format, right? Then you can only go up to 2 terabyte. So if I buy a 4 terabyte drive and I choose FAT32, I can only use 2 terabyte on that drive, waste the other 2. Okay. So I can cut it into 2 terabyte FAT32 volumes. Okay. One of my students, when he took my CIS824, he was like, oh, no wonder. This is why when I have my external hard drive, I could only see 2 terabyte out of the 4 terabyte, right? That's because the format, the file system that he used. Now, if he choose EXFAT, it would completely see the 4 terabyte, the complete drive. You can format the whole thing with EXFAT. So what do I mean when formatting? Internally, when you format, you rewrite the file system. The files doesn't go away. It's still there. It just free up that space to write new files to it. Like for your SSD, when you delete a file, it doesn't go away until something write over it. So this is why I tell people when you change your micro SD or your, you trying to dispose your drive, make sure that you physically damage it, because somebody can still pick that up and be able to read something from there, right? So that's important. So If I'm trying to format a drive, I can simply, let me go to this PC so you can see. Let's say if I'm trying to do this, I just right click, right? And then I can choose format. Inside Windows, you're allowed to do that, but this process can be done during installation of operating system. And that's why we have to bring it up. Now, format, like I said, doesn't clean out the data. It just free up that existing space for something else. So even if you format, malware still exists, still, right? Data still exists. So if you think you format and throw away your drive that nobody can see your data, you're wrong. Okay. So just for precaution.
How can
Question?
you, if you format it and you use another system to read it, how can you read it? And if when you want to read it, there's nothing, like,
Yeah, so your OS is gonna say there's nothing, all your old stuff is gone, right? So you have to use a specific tool. And the way that we do this in forensic is we would use tools like X-Ways, Paladin. Some of them are commercial tool, meaning that there are thousands of dollars per license, or some of them are free. There are forensic tools that you can actually see what files it is, and some tools are better than other in showing you what type of files it is. But a lot of the times we would only see addresses and system values of what that file would be. So usually we see that from the internal system standpoint.
okay.
Like you would see like numbers and letters, which is hex values for what that file would be. And if you know what it is, then you would know what file it is. Okay. Yeah, so if you guys are interested in that CIS824, we can't add any more students in that, but I teach forensic, and it's a very interesting area to me still. Like every time I teach it or every time I use it, I learn something else about it. So okay. So for exFAT, we know that we have 512 terabyte is recommended the volume size, but you can go higher, right? Up to 64 zettabyte. And eventually, maybe when your children or your grandchildren be using this, right, you would see zettabyte being implemented for consumer use, because we have information storage requirement everywhere. Okay. Data. And the Windows operating system that can utilize exFAT is 7. We say 8.1 because 8.0 was replaced by 8.1. So when you did your practice lab last week, the purple operating system that you see there, that's 8.1. So 7, 8.1, and the last one is Windows 10. Microsoft will not release any more after 10, they announced. They only update the 10. Now, server, on the other hand, they continue to do that because that's moneymaker. Okay, so if you have Windows 10, you just run the updates on 10, and that will keep you current. And security updates are important. Some updates cause issue, but the majority, it's important to run updates. Okay. So before we get into proprietary, let me switch back to notes. Do you have any question for me? So exFAT information and Windows OS is here. This chapter in CIS25 in the book is a longer chapter. I cut this down so that way we can size it to the session and give you the major primary, points and concept. But if you read the book itself, it is a longer chapter. Okay, so when we say workstation operating system, what does this mean? It means the client computer, your laptop, your desktop, okay? That's considered client operating system or workstation operating system. So when you're looking at the user computer in a business, right? Like let's say I have a real estate company and I have 10 realtor working for me. Those realtor sitting at their desk, right, would use the laptop or the desktop that would use Workstation OS. And every license, you know this, right, needs to be paid. So in a business, like a small business, if they have 10 computers, they have to buy 10 licenses of operating system. Okay. Illegal use of license will cause a lot of issue, including major fines and even jail time, right? In the scale of business, you see this. A lot of people, consumer based, they use illegal Windows license and they get away with it. I tell my students that go for NSA, CIA jobs, FBI jobs, I said, stop downloading illegal stuff because they will find it because you have an IP address, you have a public IP. And when you fill out your information, they will research you for sure. And plus you have to take a lie detecting test too. So and they're always hiring. So if you are interested in security jobs, look at theirs, Okay, so Windows, it's not an open source, so it's considered proprietary or closed source. Open source software or OS would be something in like Linux, like Ubuntu, Kali, Mint. Those are, the source code is available for developers to improve and contribute. So they are freely available for the public, where closed source like Mac OS and Windows OS is closed source or proprietary. Okay. This is a part for the 1102 or the 1002 exam. So the second part of A+ certification requires you to know OS inside out, right? Configuration, troubleshooting OS, and so forth. Okay. Now, Mac operating system is usually, you just simply say Mac OS. A lot of people say Mac OS X. That X just represent the version number. And if you know you own iMac or iPad, you know this. On the mobile devices, it's called iOS, but there's still version releases. Every software has version number. People would give it a nickname. Developers give it a nickname to make it easy. Like on the Android, they like using snacks, right? Kit Kat, jelly beans, ice cream, stuff like that. So it would be a nickname for that version number. And Android is Linux based. Android supported by Google, right? And so many of the Linux releases are open source. Not all of them are. There are some that are closed source. There's difference between free software and open source software. Free software could be trial, right? Like you can download and use for 30 days. And then open source is freely available with the open source code where developers can contribute. And you can donate money to that project, of course. Now, open source can be used for education purposes, right? And also research purposes. But when you start using it for private use, you have to check the license information. Okay. So Linux is an open source, most part. Okay. So here you would see Ubuntu, Mint, Kali. Now, Red Hat Enterprise, there's some licensing involved with the seats, but for student to use Red Hat, it's free. So Red Hat is like it's free for education, but when you use it for business, they charge. Question. So for the next question, we simply identify two proprietary operating system, and you can name, you know, any of the Mac OS is okay. The 1015 is Catalina, and then you got Mojave, right? You got Yosemite. So Apple, they like to use places or location name to as the nickname of their version. And then Android, they like using snack names. Okay. So it's really a thematic thing that they choose. So proprietary could be Windows 7, Windows 10, Mac OS. Okay. If you're looking at network appliances, the iOS for Cisco, that's proprietary to Cisco. So there are different types. So I just need to have two. Question?
Yes, my son has a Mac and is asking for that. I just saw the name, that Mojave one. It's like a upgrade or something. Do you?
Yeah, so if it asks for Mojave, then that's 10.14 version. You can go to Apple website and you can see how the upgrade support for that. You just click it and then it just download and upgrade. Yeah, Apple support fully. So
Okay.
if he has an older version like 10.12 or 10.11, then it's going to ask for it, because with the upgrade, you have different features, different tools. The majority is the same, but they do add some new things to the interface as far as tools. And then also in the back, they probably added security and other things that's needed.
Okay, so then go ahead and download it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's going to take a bit, so he can't use anything. And, you know, um, in any system, whenever before you upgrade or back up your files, like cloud it just in case, because things can happen in the middle or somewhere, you know, before the finish, and then you have your backup files. So it's a good practice to do that. Less on Apple side than Windows, but you know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the current operating system that you see in the market for Service Pro, right, which is its last, is Windows 10. So if you buy a Service Pro 2 years from now, you're still going to have Windows 10, but they have updated it. So it would say like Windows 10 point something point X, right? But we know it as Windows 10, but they have updated the releases. So if you have Windows 10.0, that's the first batch, and then they had re-release 10.1, 10.2, 10 point, and so forth. So they did for version control there. Okay. Any question as far as operating system, the type? So let's say you go and open a business today, and let's say that you have 20 employees. You buy 20 computers, and if they don't come with operating system, you have to buy 20 licenses for those. So software costs just as much as software. Then you have to buy Microsoft Office or Microsoft Office 365, right? Which you have to buy licenses for. The only free ones are for education for the first 2 years, and then after that, you know. So our district pay for the licenses for employees, staff, and even students after 2 years. Okay.
So, question.
Mhm.
So people aren't motivated to use Linux as their.
They are, but a lot of the applications are not freely available, or not freely, but available for Linux use. So for example, like if I'm a gamer, right, a lot of the games are written for Windows for that chip.
Oh, no,
For
I mean, if you're starting your own business.
and that comes back to application too. So let's say that if I'm using like, I don't know, a financial application, tax application to file tax. Now you can do a lot of stuff on browser, so you do see Android and Linux climbing, in the use. But if you going back to like HR applications, stuff that are not browser based, it's still a lot of the applications are written for Windows because 80% or more of businesses use Windows environment. So developers, they have to write for where they can make money, right? But yeah, I mean, I would be motivated to use Linux for some part of it, but you cannot get away from not using Windows environment because your client uses Windows and then your distributor uses Windows. So you have to use at least one Windows system to interpret their files when they email it to you, right? Dot
Right.
doc. It's crazy. And it's just, and this is what I see whenever, I see a network. A lot of the times you would see at least a couple Windows systems, even though they're running Linux. But yes, people should be motivated to use open source. And you don't have a lot of support on the open source end, meaning that when you have issues with your software, right, you can contact them and they can fix it for you. So, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So smartphone and tablets, you would use iOS or Android, right? And then Windows, if you're using like the Nokia, and I think they have a few with the Motorola, right? Motorola partner up with Windows for a while, but now they transition over to mostly Android. Uh, what you see is you did have Windows Mobile that came out, and then now they relabel it and they call it Windows IoT. Um, so you can, if you ever have a Raspberry Pi, you can run Windows IoT on it. The newer Raspberry Pi has higher internal storage, so it's great. You can run it. It won't perform as its best, right? You can run Linux on it. There's awesome stuff that you can do with Raspberry Pi. But so iOS and Android for most part, but there was some Windows operating system releases for that, Windows Mobile or Windows IoT if you visit there. So if you need to install, this is what you do. You simply, I use search engine for practically everything in my life nowadays, right? So you just search for Windows ISO, okay? And with that, Microsoft requires you to download the installer, which is the package to bring down the ISO in its format. And ISO files are, it's the way that they can put in boot folder and all the installation file into an image package. Okay. Now, if you want to really see some of the files itself, what you can do is you can use a software tool like a burning ROM, like a DVD burner type of software, Nero, stuff like that, to unpackage that image. So you can see the raw files or the installation raw files. But we would need the image file to run the installation. And once you have the ISO, you can put it on your USB or on your DVD or CD even, right, for the older ones. So you can download or even create the ISO, but the download takes a while. I just want to let you know it might take, depending even on the higher bandwidth, because when people download, they don't understand that it's not just your connection, it's the server connection too, how it's responding to your request. So when you download, your connection can be great, but their connection might be slow. And you know, Microsoft is distributing to the world through their servers, so that could slow down on their end as well. And this explains why if you go to certain smaller server and you're downloading a movie, right, and you're checking your bandwidth, and your bandwidth is great, but you know, their server could be in Ukraine, and it would be very slow, and so it would take 5 hours for you to download that movie sometimes. Okay. Any questions? So that's a little bit of networking with that. But you can download the ISO, and so if you want Linux, right? Like if you want Linux Mint, I like Mint. Mint is nice. So with Mint, there's Cinnamon version, and they always have new releases, so they also have a nickname. So this one uses Spike's name, as you notice. So you can use, and remember that Linux, it has different desktop environment. So when you download one version of it, you can also change the way it looks. So you're not limited to that desktop look. So it would come equipped with specific desktop. In Windows, you only have one desktop environment. You have Windows, button, taskbar, stuff like that. But in Linux, you have flexibility to change up on how your desktop would look and the tools that would come with that desktop. So the common one that you see is Ubuntu, right? And remember, Ubuntu, you can do live USB, so you can run it from a USB. You just need about 8 gig USB. That should be good. So, and Ubuntu is well supported. I like it a lot. When I teach Linux, I usually start with this one first. And then if you want to learn about ethical hacking, you use Kali Linux to start. There are other releases. This one comes with all the tools, and you can even run Kali on Raspberry Pi. You can run Kali. You can make dual boot system, which you can have Windows and Linux together on the hard drive, and you can select. It's a little bit harder to do, so make sure you check the tutorial before you start. But when I teach security, a lot of times we go to Kali because it's easy to use. Okay. And their logo is a dragon. So if you've seen like movies and shows and they're running, tools and stuff like that, likely it's in Linux. And, sometime you would see different operating system that's used there.
Professor?
Yes.
Yeah, I think I got hacked when I was using the Kali Linux on my Raspberry Pi. So I don't know what to do about that.
So I would disable all the network connection. You can use it as a standalone to test. You don't have to use it with the existing network. The best way to do this is to test is to simulate a network. So if you have like an old router sitting around, you can make it like an access point and then connect to it and then connect another computer to it. So you can simulate a smaller network instead of connect out to the internet. Now, when you run install updates on Linux, it's going to want to connect to the internet. But the best test system is an isolated system. And I tell my students that all the time. I said, don't try to be adventurous and look at other people on the internet when you start scanning. Scan yourself first. Make sure you know what to do first before you start getting out. So yeah, so on what I would do on the Raspberry Pi is I would disable on Kali. You can go to the graphical user interface. You can disable the wireless connection, right? And then you can disable and just use the WAN connection and connect it to like an old wireless router. So I'm sidetracking now, but
Okay, yeah.
Okay, sorry. That's my other love, so I'm going on to another tangent somewhere. Sorry about that. But we will talk more in security class if you're taking the C. Two types of mobile tablet operating systems. So we learned iOS, Android, Chrome OS, or Windows. Okay. So you can pick any to list two there. That's okay. You can put Windows 7. It had 7 Mobile, came out for a little bit. And then you can have iOS and then the version number. Okay, so for question 10, let's talk about encryption, but let's move on to the notes real quick so I can highlight some of the things. So here it talks, so Chrome OS is used by Google, and you often see this with Chromebook, and it's Linux in the back. So, you know, if you want, you can look at their version and see. A lot of the time you would find any Linux supporting tools would usually work with Chrome, but there's different way to install stuff, but so you usually have to use the terminal, which is the command line to install things. It's a good way to also learn to troubleshoot as well using the terminal. Okay. So in Microsoft, there are 2 areas that we can use for encryption. BitLocker is used to encrypt the entire drive, like your external USB, your E drive, right, on your actual hard drive. Or, you know, if you plug something in and it needs to encrypt it. So BitLocker is used for drive encryption. Then EFS is used for individual file encryption. So what do I mean by this? So let's say that here is my documents, right? And let's say that I'm gonna pick something. Okay, let's say that I want to encrypt that folder. All the files in that folder. I would right click it, and then I would go to properties. And then on here, this is the property sheet for that folder. And if you want to give the permission to certain people to access that folder, you would go security tab and then add the user account. But that user account has to exist on your computer, and you can go into control panel to make your user account, or you can go into computer management console. I showed you that last week to make your user account. So I can add the user and then add the appropriate control. So if I want to edit this, I can add the user. Okay, so this is about permission. So I can have the user created, located, right? So let's say if I wanted to add Mary, who doesn't really exist on my computer. So if it doesn't, it's going to try to look for that, right? But what happened is if you have the right name added, the right user added, it would highlight it, and then you can assign like what they can do to that folder. Now to encrypt that folder, you would click advanced button after you right click it and choose property. And then, oh, no, not this advanced button. Sorry, let's go back to general. Advanced button under the general tab. And then here, what you can do is you can choose to encrypt content, okay? So with this, right, it tells me that I can compress or I can encrypt. Once you choose encrypt, it would encrypt everything, or you have to go and encrypt individual file. Okay, so see how mine is grayed out, right? It doesn't let me encrypt the container. So what I have to do is I have to go in here, and let's say that I would do right click choose property, okay, advanced, and then I can choose encrypt, okay. Now it also depends on the attribute and the property of that file. Sometimes that, you know, the creator of the file, they don't let you change that option, so you can't really encrypt it. So what does encryption mean? It means that it takes your plain text information that you can see and understand and make it something that's not plain text, so that way it's not understandable, right? So if I have a document that contains my financial report, I can make it not visible to other people by encrypting it, by, you know, using an algorithm that change it up to something that's not visible to other people, and I can only have that key. Now when you encrypt with BitLocker, you simply right-click that drive and then choose encryption, okay? Like here, I just right-click my, my drive. Now, why don't I have this on my Windows 10? Because you probably try it and you're like, well, Dr. Wynn's lying because I don't see BitLocker on my Windows 10. Well, if you don't have the Pro version or the Enterprise version or a certain version, you will not have BitLocker, okay? So most laptop will come with the Home or the Basic Home version, which doesn't have that, okay? So the reason why is that Microsoft deemed that business would use encryption more, so they would only release it with a certain version, which costs more than, you know, your home version, okay? Now you can upgrade it, but like I said, anytime you upgrade it from one version to the next, you're gonna make sure you back up your files and everything beforehand. Now, when you right-click the drive, and if you're able to choose BitLocker, that means that you can encrypt that entire drive. Then what you can do is it will allow you two options. One is to store the key to your computer. Two is to print out or import that key. Why do people need to print out the key? So that way they can give it to another person physically. So that way the other person can access that drive and unlock it to decrypt it. Or what they can do is they can save it on that system, so only that system would have the key to unlock that drive. Okay. Now, encryption is great as far as security, but you have to keep in mind that it takes up resources, okay, processing power, storage, you know, like as far as RAM storage. And when you encrypt and decrypt, it would take time, right? And effort. So should we go and encrypt everything? No, right? Only the important things, the things that are high in importance. So that kind of give you a little bit on how to use encryption. So BitLocker for drive, EFS for file. You can only compress or encrypt. You cannot do both because it changes the way the file header is. And so it can either compress to shrink it to smaller or to encrypt to make it unreadable to other people. Okay? So what does this next question ask us? Yeah, we would use BitLocker for drive, EFS for individual files. Now the home edition is just for your basic user, right? It has some features in it, but it doesn't have some of the additional tools like what I said, right? It wouldn't have branch cache, it wouldn't have BitLocker, but it has EFS. So I'll finish 11 and we'll take a break. I'm sorry. For 11, it says a client has Windows 7 Home 32-bit operating system installed on the desktop. He asks you to help him upgrade the computer to a newer operating system. Well, after Windows 7 is Windows 10. the easiest, and Microsoft did a whole free upgrade for a long time, right? They did it for like 2 years. If you have Windows 7, they try to push you to go to Windows 10 for free. So there was a question Michelle asked me last week, why do we see it as Windows 7 there? Well, because they did the upgrade from Windows 7 to Windows 10, even though it loads Windows 10 or Windows 8.1, it still shows Windows 7 in the back because they did an upgrade. Okay.
So they didn't upgrade the backup and restore?
Nope. So it would restore back to Windows 7.
Yeah.
And then you have to upgrade it again, you see? So what do you need to do right then and there? Well, the easiest way is to create a different backup. After you upgrade your Windows from Windows 7 to Windows 10, create a backup. That's easy, right? Control panel, okay? System and security, all else fails, go to system and security because it's about your system and it's about security. Go to backup and restore. See how mine says Windows 7 as well? Is because it was Windows 7 before it wasn't. It was, I bought it with Windows 10, but when they manufactured this, they put Windows 7 license on it and then they did an upgrade at the restore point. Okay, so here is where you would have, so it shows me here, right? If I want to make a backup, I just click set up a backup. Once you have that backup, don't put it on that drive if you don't want, put it on a different drive. And then you would use that to restore. So what happens is it's going to restore it to Windows 10, which was an upgrade from Windows 7. Okay? It's still going to have to point back to that old OS because that was the foundation for it, but we upgraded it and then we did a backup. So the step again, control panel, your best friend, go to system security, and I'm under category view. If you want to change it, you can go to view right here, and there's different option there, but system security, and then backup and restore. You saw this in the lab last week with Windows 8, but okay. So I'm gonna pause here, take a 15-minute break so you can, get some snacks, go to the bathroom. We'll finish the rest when we come back, talk about the lab, talk about the game, and then that's it for the last session. Okay, let's take a break. Be back at 2:15, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's up?
I wanted to ask, so what percentage of your students that pass this certificate course go on to complete and receive their CompTIA certificate?
I don't know yet. This is the first time we're running the non-credit course, but we will have the license for some of the certifications available next month. So I will send everybody some information on that. We can't get the institution license for CompTIA A plus, Security Plus, or some of the more advanced certifications. They only sell Cloud Plus as an institution license. So, and I cannot buy individual voucher based on the funding that we receive from state. But we are able to give, or you are able to get discount as a student member. But my CIS824, I did have about, I want to say 5-6 students that pursued the test, and the majority of them passed. When I taught at College of the Desert, I taught CS, I forgot which number. One of the courses equivalent to A plus, and out of the 15 students that took the class, because it was a small class in the afternoon, 2 or 3 of them passed or took the A plus, and all of them passed when they took it. So we won't have the result from this until after the course has launched and we have to really look at the data. But I would encourage you to take the certification because,
Gotcha.
yeah, because this industry, if you look at any technical IT work, it recommends, or they are mainly looking for A plus. When we talk to employer, if you have the A plus, that's something that would start for them. Because when we started the conversation with the employer in the past, and this is why some of our sister colleges, when they teach it, they don't teach it to the CompTIA A plus, they teach it to other certifications, and it's difficult for them to help the student get work. So as soon as I mentioned that we are a CompTIA partner, we teach the CompTIA, a lot of employers are listening because that's what the industry wants. So the book that I'm using, if you see that on the syllabus or in Canvas shell, it's actually a decent book and it's not expensive. But you can also use Professor Messer YouTube videos. That's also great. He does a good job. And if you go to his website and create an account, it's free. I think they have an automated, quiz, weekly quiz that you can take that helps you review. There are a lot of really cool apps now that you can use to review materials for CompTIA. That's free. CompTIA does sell the package for their lab and their books, but all my students, they mainly take the class and then they use the book to study and they sit for the test. Certification tests always go up in price, so if you do it 2 years from now, it might be a little higher because it's in demand, so it's always changing in price for that reason.
Do you know if an initial certification is a certain price, but what about recertification? Is that lower price?
Yes. So the whole point is for you not to recertify, but for you to keep education credit. And once you are certified, they will send you the information on how you can maintain your training. It's either through them or through, their partners. So if you keep, let's say that you take training courses, you can maintain that certification, and you still have to pay a little bit, but not a full price. But if you recertify, you have to pay the full price for recertification with some discount as a member, of course. But the point is not to recertify, the point is to maintain it. And that's how they can keep making money. I talked to the director of CompTIA when he came out for uh, one of our meetings with the region, and they added a lot more certifications to their list now compared to last year. So you got the CYSA for, that's been going on for a while now, but they added some stuff for data analysis and things like that, because it's, the industry now changed to require more database certification or skills. So you can buy like exam cram to study for it. Those books are like cheap, and you can find ebooks for even cheaper. Use new books, but you want the current series, which is the 10.001 and the 10.0, the 10.0, or the the 10.002, I believe. I put the series on if you look at the book title, make sure that it's a current one, because the questions change and there's more questions. Okay.
Thank you.
find, let me share with you something real quick.
So we should really, when we're thinking about CompTIA, that's something we would pursue entirely on our own, correct?
Yes, because I originally wanted it to be built with CIS824, which is a credited course. It's equivalent to this course and much more, because it's 16 weeks, or it's a 4-unit course. So you have more lab and you have more requirement. When I proposed it, I intended for it to be with the CompTIA A+. That means that the student can test for it at the end. And they originally agreed with the funding, and then halfway through, they told me that I cannot take any grant or any funding that's given to us to purchase individual student voucher. What I can do is I can buy an institution license, so every student can have access to that, because it's about inclusion. And I understand that, because it's funded for the college. It's not funded to a certain group of students. So they want to make sure that it's included for everybody. And so what I plan to do is we're gonna get Certiport, which certify more with Microsoft, and then they have their other version of this. So when I get that in October, I will send everybody in this class some information on it. So if you want, you can test for it. It's just, we just have to give you access, and then it will be all virtual.
Thank you.
Are you saying there's an A+ version for Microsoft?
It is there is like a more of like a IT fundamental version of it, not an A+ version, because CompTIA has an IT fundamental, which is lower than this one. And then they have a network fundamental for Microsoft. That's part of their administrative certifications. So, but yeah, they don't have like the full blown, like compared to CompTIA, but they have something similar.
Interesting.
Okay.
I have one more question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I do have a background in some database administration. What
Okay.
would be a good certificate to help shore that up?
From what I know, is the common one that you see with database administrator is, now they have a lot of new ones, but you tend to see for a long time is Oracle, and Oracle does have products for their database, and it changes from every 2-3 years. So if you plan to work with Oracle, that will be a good one to get. Now I think there's a lot of emphasis with cloud-based administration. So I would suggest start with like Cloud Plus, which we will be offering soon. And then some data analysis, because that deals with that too. But you can get into like vendor specific, cloud companies like AWS, Microsoft Azure. A lot of companies, many employers in my last meeting, they asked for Azure certifications or knowledge of Azure. So I would go that route with and then tie that to SQL, Microsoft SQL. So
Good to know.
Microsoft Yeah. So look at Microsoft website. They have one specifically for system and database administration, I believe. Because they always add like the subcategory. So you know that there are a lot of companies use this SharePoint, Azure, and then they have to pull stuff from their database. So I would recommend that. Mhm.
Thank you.
All right, I have another question.
Sure.
You just mentioned that you're going to offer a Cloud Plus class. Is that going to be vendor neutral?
It's through CompTIA Cloud Plus. That's vendor neutral. And then in that certificate, you will explore different vendor. It is a certificate base, and whenever I write a certificate, it takes 2 years to go through our district and our chancellor office approval. It's just the process, it takes a long time. However, um, we did find, I talked to CompTIA rep and we found the institutional license for that, so we can use some money toward it. I tried to also piggyback it with the business portion of it, which is project management. My colleague wrote a project management certificate that's going through now. So it will be a cloud project management, like a cloud project manager certificate, along with another certificate that's just pure cloud. But my emphasis will be more for the other classes will be more Azure instead of AWS, because RCC already did the AWS Cloud Architect. They have that class as a credit course for their track, and I think it's being offered. So if you're interested in that, you can take a look at RCC offering. I didn't want to overlap them because, you know, we want to have options for our students in the district, not just everybody's teaching the same thing all the time.
But isn't that just useful if you only want to work for Amazon? Or is that?
Well, Amazon service a lot of companies though. So if you don't necessarily have to work for Amazon, you can work for a company that uses Amazon product. So yes, it will be tied to only Amazon product.
Okay.
Okay. And, you know, but with Microsoft, I felt like there would be more companies. So you're looking at government to city to hospital. A lot of people use Microsoft because their client used Microsoft and their business partner used Microsoft. So I feel like there would be more traction in that. And also we have talked to Microsoft becoming a partner with Microsoft. So as an, you know, in education arena. So they've been kind of coming around to that. They do support that. So with the partnership, our students have more benefits in such, and then because we already buy Microsoft products as an institution, so it's only makes sense that they would partner up with us. So, all right. Any other questions?
I just have a comment. I mean,
Sure.
I just heard that RCC hired somebody so that they can move new classes through the process faster. I don't know if that makes sense to your situation.
Yeah, so yeah, that they hire people to kind of streamline some of the administrative process with it. But so it takes 6 weeks at the chancellor office, sometime longer if there's issue, but it still takes like department discipline, all the faculty, you know, the people that are involved approval, and sometimes people don't click what they need to click. That's the problem, is that because we are so busy, like even I know I'm at fault in that sometimes, like I'm really responsive in email, and then I forget that I have to log on to the database and look through the stuff that my colleagues are writing, and I'm co-writing it with them, and you know, so it's just we get a lot of, right now we're trying to get online stuff, so in case if they're offering more online stuff next semester, we get our chancellor office to approve. So I have a deadline like on Tuesday to get 20 classes online form submitted. So it's
Wow.
intense. Yeah, it's you know, welcome to the faculty world, right? But you know, I enjoy teaching part is the favorite part in my job, and helping people is my other favorite part. The other paperwork part, not so much, but it's part of my job. So, but the cool thing is, oh, I forgot to tell you guys, we got a lot of money putting toward non-credit. So I'm gonna put together a list of things that I want to get for our non-credit classes, because I told the dean that this semester my students have to go out and find their computer and their parts, spending their own money. And if we can buy like extra parts like SODIMM RAMs, hard drive, stuff like that, where they, students can use it and it's cheap, it's not that much. And she said, sure. So I'm going to put together a list for her, and so that way they have it in inventory. So you can check out like tools. You can also get some, small size RAM stuff to do it for this class, or network stuff. So that's to come. Okay. All right, let me go into share real quick and let's talk about the rest of this. And then we will complete our session with the lab part. Important to kind of mention real quick about branch cache is that it is a way that they can make it where if you are accessing remote clients, branch cache settings would help with, bandwidth and use effective data requests. So that is part of the Windows 10 Pro and Enterprise. So now the scale between that is Enterprise, as you know, would be for a larger set of license. So if you are in the scale of like Bank of America, Walmart, stuff like that, or if you have thousands of users, even our district, our CCD, with all the colleges, all the students and faculty and staff, then you want to consider Enterprise license compared to just Pro, because you have more features. And then with the bulk license, the difference in the prices might not even be that much. So that would be something to consider if you have to make the business decision. Okay, I want to highlight the boot process is essential, because when you do the installation, you can go a few ways. You can use CD, DVD, or Blu-ray to boot, so you can install the OS. So set your boot priority to the drives that you're booting to, like CD or DVD or Blu-ray. Another way we can do is we can boot from an image from a network. So we have to have network connection at that point. So this is how they would deploy the image for the rest of the systems. Let's say that I want to upgrade all the computer in the school district. I gotta make sure those systems are connected, and then I can deploy the boot for all of those systems at once from the network. I just gotta make sure I set it up from a broadcasting standpoint to all the receiving system. Then I can also use USB boot. Like I said, right, you want to have the installation file on your USB and set that USB drive as your primary boot at doing that process. We can boot from another internal hard drive or another section of the drive, as long as the drive is configured to set up as boot. So Apple uses a thing called NetBoot technology. You don't see Apple Server being used very much because the functionality of it is less. There's limited functionality with Apple Server compared to Windows Server or Linux Server. But Apple does have the capability to boot from the network using NetBoot. Okay, any question? Okay, so here on this page, it talks about different installation. So you can upgrade if you have an existing version. This is important to know. So you want to communicate correctly to people. If you want to do an empty hard drive and install OS on it, it's called clean install. Okay, clean install. If you want multiple operating system on that disk, that same physical drive, that's called multi-boot. And then if you are repairing a corrupted OS or a broken OS, then that will be a repair installation. Okay, because in each of these require different time span, and it would require, you know, different tasks and such, which requires different service amount, money, time, right? Resources. So make sure we know the difference there. And then and I see people mix this up all the time, right? When people say refresh and reset, okay? So when you say you reset your PC, you are going to put it, so it tells you here, it says reset PC offers simpler reset to include the option for keeping personal file. Refresh and reset, right? Meaning that when you do refresh, you are going to restore. Okay, so when you think about refresh, you think about restore. When you reset, you're gonna put it back to where it's keeping the personal file. So in the Windows option, you would see that it says keep my files, right? And those files would ideally carry through with the reset process. However, I'll be sure to make sure you have a backup of it in case something happens, because you never know, right? So make sure that you do that, especially for Windows. Okay, so when we say refresh, really we imply that we would go back to the restore, and this is only the indication for, you know, repairing the OS. I'm not talking about refreshing pages and other things. So refresh really means that we are restoring it back to its state. When we do an unattended installation, that is being done remotely through the network, meaning that I can have a server that's sending out all the installation files to all the system that's connected. And that means that I don't have to have each technician sitting at that system to click through all the options. So on that image, I would set up where it's automated. Like, you know how when you run the installation, at some point, you're gonna have to click yes, no, and then make the user account and all of that. So all of that can be scripted and also pre-configured, so that way it would automate it. So all the system name is going to be sequential. There will be, you know, a generic administrative user account on that system and so forth. So that's called unattended installation. And then other installation options, meaning that we would create an image file and customize, okay? And you do see this a lot for different departments. You can have an institution, an organization that would have 20 different images, right? Because they would have one for HR, they would have one for finance, that, you know, because people use different application. So with that, we would have the OS with specific application. The way that we do things appropriately is that we don't put things on there where people don't need it. Okay. So if you need something, you would put it for that department, because if you make it available for everybody, then it becomes the security issues, because people are going to start looking into something where they shouldn't be looking into. So, you know, need to know basis. That's it. Okay. So here it talks about, you know, using the MDT for installation toolkit if you practice this in the field. And, you know, you can create it for your client desktop OS, right? Like, let's say I can put, you know, Office's packages with the OS for the image, and I would use that toolkit to be able to do the unattended installation. Okay. And then we can do an in-place upgrade. So what we can do is that if we don't want it to delete the previous installation, like Windows 7, we can upgrade it and it will be able to keep some of the existing apps in the file, right? And it will be equivalent or better to the edition. So if I have a Windows 7 Home, I can go to Windows 10 Home. I don't want to go to 10 Basic because that will be less, right? We always want to go to equivalent or better, so that way the user would have the same features on that OS to utilize. Okay. And if you have 32-bit, you can only go to 32-bit. Okay. Now, with the upgrade for 64, you have to reformat. So, because it's different bit size system, so you can go from 32-bit to 32-bit only, meaning that if I have Windows 7 32-bit, I can upgrade it to Windows 10 32-bit. Now, if I want to get to 64-bit, what I have to do is I have to do a clean install. Okay. Any question? So that kind of give us some information about our question. Let me go up. I think we left it off right here, right? So, sorry about my dog. A client has Windows 7 Home 32-bit on the desktop. He asked you to upgrade. This is why we need to go to 32-bit Windows 10 Home Edition. That will be like the direct upgrade because it will be the most efficient in cost. Now, yes, you can make it Pro, but you will have additional feature. However, that will be higher in cost for the client. Okay, so it needs to be the same or better. Now, if he tells you he's going to start running, a small business from home, you can suggest to him that yes, you should go with the Pro because you would have encryption capability and some additional feature for remote connection. So that will be better. Okay. For 11B, it asks if the client wishes to select an operating system with more feature for business applications, what do you recommend? We would go to 32-bit Pro, 32-bit Windows 10 Pro, right? And I would throw in I would say that you should upgrade your processor to 64-bit if you're going to go with that, so you can maximize your storage capability. So the bit size is really down to the processor, right? Its capability, and also ties that to storage, RAM, everything else. Okay. So here I put for B, 32-bit Windows 10 Pro, or we can do an upgrade with the processor for 64-bit and then get it to 64-bit Windows 10 Pro. Any question? All right. Next, a client asks you to restore Windows 10 system, right? How do you begin the process? So you simply go to settings, okay, and choose recovery. And then you would just see get started under the reset this PC. But before that, I would ask the client, are there any files that you need that's important that you want to save before we start this process? So it might be pictures, home movies, whatever that's stored on the computer. So what you do is you can transfer that onto an external drive or a different drive and then go through the process. Okay. All right. So once you go to settings, then choose recovery. You saw this in last week lab. Which reset options do you select if the client wishes to save her personal files? Select keep my files option. Now, ideally, that should keep her files during the process. Like I said, it's not guaranteed. Even Windows says that, right? Microsoft has a prompt for you. It says, as you go through this, there might be a possibility that you would lose some personal files. So that's their disclosure. And in the case that happens to you, you don't go back and blame them, right? So make sure that we transfer it first, but you can choose this option to keep the files in place. And sometimes restore would take a couple of try. If you've done this already, you know, right? I always get handed a laptop or a desktop that's broken, and they say, oh, you know, I don't know why it doesn't start, or if it does, it takes a long time to even load the desktop. Can you fix it? Right? And then I would ask them, I said, do you want to keep anything on this computer? And they said, no. Okay. Right? The fastest way, right? Because if you try to restore, it doesn't work, we're going to have to wipe it and do the clean installation. So the fastest way is to do the clean installation, and then, but that doesn't save their file. Question? Okay. All right, so the next part is partition. So let me come back to that. So here it talks about the clean installation, and you can do clean installation on a regular system. You can make it on the virtual machine, and virtual machine we can use VMware Workstation Player. We can use VirtualBox, but you just need ISO, and then VXD is for virtual machines. So ISO file, I'll show you where you can get that for Microsoft or Linux, right? Every single one of them should have some form of ISO. Now, Kali goes through BitTorrent. So if you use BitTorrent, you know, right? Don't use it when you don't need it. Disconnect or uninstall it, because that way people have access to your files and it funnels in that way too for security risk. Okay. Here it just talks about different things that you need to set up, right? Location, that's in work, home, public. You can choose. So unattended installation, they have all of these questions filled out already, right? On the image when they push that through the network. So nobody have to sit there and click. Okay. So it will be very convenient. So you can do thousands of the system at the same time. Product key, all of that is pre-filled out. Otherwise, if you do it on your client system, right, individually, you have to fill all of this information in and click next and next and next, right? And then put in username and password. Multi-boot installation, here's some tips for those of you who, I know there's 1 or 2 students in this class that already use multi-boot. However, right, if you're new to it, okay, so if you're using older Windows operating system, make sure you install Windows first. It likes to be first, and when you know, and then when you set up Linux next to it, you gotta make sure that you edit the setting, otherwise Linux takes over. Then you only see Linux. Okay, so install the oldest version of Windows first. Okay, so if you do 2 Windows, like Windows 10 and Windows 8.1, do Windows 8.1 first, so you can have 2 OS. And when it boots up, it's going to show you which one, and you can pick. So if you want some practice, that's a good practice to do. Section your drive, half for Windows 8, half for Windows 10, or Windows 7 and Windows 10. Put Windows 7 first, and then put Windows 10. I like Windows 7 more than 8.1 because 8.1 is a little clunky. They change up some menu option that requires more RAM. Okay, make sure that we section the drive with different partitions. And with like 8.1, you can have, you know, 500 gig. You only need like about 100 some at least to kind of give the user the flexibility anyway for the gig. You can even do as small as like 60 gig. That's really tight. That's, you know, not a lot of data room there. So section your drive and partition it. Then you can format those partitions for specific use. You're going to create one primary partition, right? When you're installing the first, so it's going to point to that. And then if you're doing multiple for multi-boot, ensure that each installation has its own primary. So if I have Windows 8.1 and Windows 10, each one of them will be primary, and as they can only be on one at a time. Okay. It's kind of like you have 2 rooms in the house and you can only be in one room at a time, right? Physically, you can only be in one room at a time. So they are both primary, but they can only be active, right? Or bootable one at a time. Okay. So here it shows you how to do repair installation with the in-place upgrade. Walk step by step. Also some remote additional deployment. So the tools that we use many different type of tools depending on the company, but the one that you often see is Acronis. And if you're using Seagate Drive, you know, Seagate and Washington Digital, they have their own tools for disk cloning or imaging. So when I image, what does that mean? I would create a system, install OS on it, install all the appropriate application on it. Then I would clone that image, make a copy of that image exactly with all the application, the files I need, and I can use the software tool and be able to transfer that to other system. Now the licenses you still have to pay for, right? But with the process in the image deployment, we can have it set up where it would see individual system name, it would have, you know, different key number, etc. for the license. Any question? Okay. So the purpose of the notes for you here is to give you a little bit more detail, right? And for those of you who are doing CompTIA, this is useful for the certification. And you can go through and partition. So master boot record, the MBR, and the GPT. We touch a little bit on this, but however, master boot record is old, GPT is new. It's able to scale for more drives. You can only have one extended partition in all the disk. And in MBR, you can have a total of 4 partitions, right? You can have one primary and then the rest extended or the mix of that, but you have to have one primary. And with the extended partitions, there's only one per physical disk. It will not allow more. So if you add more, it just automatically created as logical disk, which is a one disk that entails little sections. There's difference between dynamic and basic disk in that with the dynamic disk, you can expand or actually have the sub-logical drive set up. And with the basic disk, this usually pertains to the primary or the individual partitions. Okay. So drive letters is just a way that we identify the drive. It doesn't necessarily have to have a drive letter. Microsoft uses C as the default because A and B were reserved for floppy back in the day. Okay. So when I look at this computer on my computer here, right? If I look at this PC, see how it's only giving me C:, that's your C drive. So that's just a letter that's assigned. And when you create a partition, you can assign it any letter you want. Okay. Sometimes they would use like Z for network and so forth, but your system automatically assign the next letter up for any attached drive. Okay, and you can reconfigure that, of course. Okay. How do I do that, you might ask, right? There's a thing called Computer Management Console. Last we talked about this. And in it, there's this management console. And you would use this management console to manage your disk. Okay, so here it tells me, see, my USB is FAT32. I never formatted it as FAT32. It was out of the box that way, right? But my operating system, my Windows 10 is running NTFS, Windows 10 Home, and then I have other recovery partitions. I make it a habit where I create backups or I schedule backups for a certain period when I don't use my computer. So that way I don't run into problem later. Okay. All right. I can definitely use more drive space there, but so here it talks about primary partitions. You can have up to 128 primary in a GPT. Compared to the old MBR, you can have 4. So going to our questions, right? For 13, it asks you how many primary partitions can be created with MBR and GPT. So for master boot record, you can only have 4 primary partitions, meaning that you can cut your drive up into 4 sections. It could all be primary, but you can only have 1 active with OS each time. Then if you have 1 primary and 1 extend, or 3 primary and 1 extended, you can have it that way too with the mix for MBR. With the GPT, you can have up to 128 primary partitions. Okay. So when you set up your disk, think about how that computer is going to be used and if it's need to scale, right? Meaning that it's need to be applied for usage in a bigger way, or if you need more drives, how you want to do that is really coming back to how you section your drive. So in the case of MBR, right, in a physical drive, you can only have 1 extended partition per drive. So if I want to have many extended partition, I need to have many physical disks. So with the master boot record, we can have 3 primary and 1 extended. In any case, right, we only can have 1 extended per drive, per physical drive. This was why it was limited. Okay, and now if you try to create more extended to that drive, it just make it a logical drive. So it's just attaching the partition to that extended partition. It's kind of like, how you have specific room in your house and there's only, let's say, 1 kitchen. And then you're trying to make 2 kitchen. What will happen is the system's going to say, oh, That's just an extended of the first kitchen. So it's gonna try to like make it one kitchen with the compartment. Okay. Any question with this?
Yes.
Yes.
What gigabyte size would you recommend to have Linux as a dual boot on a Windows?
How big is your hard disk?
Well, I mean, this is an HP Stream,
Okay.
so it only has like 28 gigabytes.
So the minimum that you can go with Linux that's actually usable is about, I would say, like slightly under 20. That's really tight with the gigs.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would go with like at least 20 and up. So to be safe, 40 gigs would be the minimum. Like, you know, for if you want to add data to it, download and stuff. But if you want to be super flexible, if you have more disk space, then I would partition it, you know, on standard, you know, I would tell the user, let's say that if I only have 200 gig drive and I use 100 gig for my Windows already, then I would maybe make the Linux 50 gig because it's not, you know, maybe I don't use it as much compared to Windows for files. So I'll make it half of the Windows.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, so we talked about the extended drive, and then lastly, it asks you if your friend asks you to help install Windows 10 on the new built PC, what type of disk formatting should you choose during the installation process? Easy, quick format. Okay, that way you don't have to specify, you know, which partition drive. Now, if you wanted advanced, right, option, then you have to specify what format goes where in which partition. What that does is it's going to take the entire disk and it's just going to format it with the file system that you choose. And I would choose NTFS because that would give me more control with access and security. But yes, you can just choose exFAT and be done with, right? But with exFAT, just keep in mind that number one, we don't have user permission for the actual files and folder. Two, right, we are not going to be able to use encryption like EFS. Okay. So, but you know, it will, and if you put Linux, add another drive and put Linux, it will likely see, now Linux sees NTFS too. It will tell you either it's non-Linux or it's Windows operating system. It would see that, okay? Most of the new releases will recognize it. But you won't be able to transfer file from one to the other because remember, they're different file system. It's like this. It's like how some people, they write in Spanish and then some people, they write in English. And if you need to be able to see if, you know, to read each other file, then you have to be able to have a translator. Okay, now FAT file system works across, but it doesn't always mean that the application that you use to read the file is compatible. So gotta make sure, okay? Any question? Okay, so
Professor, can I see number 3?
3, yes, you can see number 3. So 3, I put FAT32, but you can put exFAT is okay. But FAT32 is compatible with Linux and Mac OS as well for 32-bit.
Can I ask a question too?
Sure.
So if I'm upgrading Windows 7 to Windows 10, And then I'm gonna add the Linux Mint. That's called the multi-boot tool, right?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome. Other questions? So if you're just upgrading, then it's upgrade. But if you added another section on your drive to install Linux Mint, then yeah, you would have a multi-boot system. Very good. So now you guys are understanding the terminology. I'm so excited. Okay. All right. No questions on the assignment. If you're done with this, save it and submit it. But if you're not and you want to spend some time looking at the notes to finish it, make sure that it gets submitted by the 22nd, which is Tuesday. I know I'm cutting it short, but technically today is the last day, and I need to submit your work before, or your grade to non-credit and also Web Advisor by the 24th. And I don't want to wait till the last minute because Web Advisor could go down and then you don't have grades. So I want to make sure that that gets in. So one other thing.
I have a question.
Yes.
I tried to boot from a bootable Linux distro, a USB flash drive, and when I was in there, I couldn't scroll over to the right to see all of the menus listed. Is that a software problem or is that my computer problem, not being able to see all the menus?
Yeah, so I think that's more of like a monitor configuration because the way they develop that, they probably intended for it to be seen. However, your monitor cannot interpret it, or your adapter actually, your video adapter, because it's not running its full driver capability at that point, because during the boot setup process, everything is minimal, right? You don't have a lot of graphics. Is because it's not able to translate or allow you. So if you can't scroll, it also is an input mechanism too. So I think personally, I think that's a downfall for that software, but I think it comes back to your device on how the device is seeing is being used with that software.
So just so I'm clear, like say the menu is from A to Z, and I can't scroll over to R through Z. That's fine.
Yeah. So have you tried using a keyboard?
Yes, I was using the keyboard to try to.
Yeah. So that could possibly be that like your keyboard input is not being understood. You see what I mean? Like when you keep pressing the arrow key.
Yes.
Yeah. So when somehow, like when you get to that point, it's not understanding any more input from the arrow key. And that could be an issue with development too. So I would go back and see if there's a new release for it, because they might have debugged that already.
Oh no, it was I was just experimenting, and I just happened to whimsically buy this Black Arch Linux bootable USB drive, and I couldn't scroll through all the stuff in the Black Arch.
Yeah, so Linux are notorious for not getting all the drivers or the firmware for your output devices, because they intend that, some of these people that's using it, they might be able to write to it. So yeah, it's notorious for that. You would see a lot of that, like wireless adapters not connecting even though you selected it. Key doesn't work, stuff like that. So you would see some of that. That's the downfall on some of the open source releases.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then if you really want to be adventurous, find resources on how you can write driver. Like if you're good at programming, see if you can use text editor to write. And developers, they do that, right? They would figure out how to get their things to work by just creating the program for it. then that'll bring you to the next level. Okay. I put up a quiz game. This is due at midnight, right, on the 22nd, meaning at 11:59. Anything after 11:59 is gonna lock, right? So when you go through, make sure you put in your full name so I know who it is. Because sometime if you're using your smartphone or whatever, it's gonna add that name, or your Google account, it's gonna try to add that name. So make sure it's your full name. That way I know where to send the prize. So you should have multiple attempts. It looks very similar to our assignments. It's multiple choice, but the faster you answer, the faster you answer accurately, the higher your points. Okay. All right. I'm going to touch a little bit on the lab. So you only need to submit week 4 assignment, complete week 4 lab, and if you like, you can attempt the quiz game. I didn't make this an extra credit. I simply created as a game for opportunity for you to win something. And for me, I just sent out Amazon gift card. It's $25. So if you want to know what the price is, it's $25 to Amazon. So, and I can email it to you. So you can attempt the quiz. And then after the midnight of the 22nd going to the 23rd, I will see the final result and then I will send it to the winner. Okay. And then again, we're going to do practice lab this week. And so if you have any outstanding work for me to grade, make sure you get it to me before the 23rd, ideally before the 22nd. So it's a small class, I can quickly grade it. I haven't really penalized late grade for this class because, you know, it's non-credit, and I look at your attempt and I say, okay, that sounds like it's a pretty good, you know, assignment. So I usually try not to penalize, but get those to me. Otherwise, all the empty ones go in as zeros and it will lower your points. So the grade that I submit will be pass or no pass to our system, right? But you can actually look at your Canvas after the course is closed. I will enable that so you can see exactly what grade you're getting as a letter grade or percentage. Okay, so only 5 pages in this lab, super easy. Okay, so go through, if you're not familiarized with practice lab, make sure that you look at the tutorial video to start. So two virtual systems that's needed for this lab. Okay, on page 3, it tells you BDC01. Okay, that one should be automatically on when you boot up. That's a server, and what they're doing is they're using Hyper-V, which is a virtualization product of Microsoft. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna have a virtual system that you're gonna run the installation on, okay? Then we're also gonna use Windows 10, which is the second one, okay? So now make sure we click the right one to turn on, so you can turn on Windows 10 when you do this, okay? Now, pay attention to all the detail in the instructions, because if you don't, you're gonna get lost and you're like, what am I gonna click here? Okay, so it tells you here, it says that make sure that you have the proper virtual machine, which is the domain controller, and then the client system, which is Windows 10. For the first task, it's showing you how to set up a USB boot device. So when you're on, it says ensure that the required devices are powered and connect. So make sure that they're both on, okay? Then on the Windows 10, it shows you where the Hyper-V icon is. Okay, so you see on the taskbar on the bottom right here. Okay, let me get to my, sometime I can't demo it with, so here's Windows 10. It's not the best with bandwidth, but okay. So once you connect it, it automatically logs you in, okay? Remember, we talked about this last week. Your native system taskbar is on the bottom, the virtual machine taskbar is inside. Make sure we click the right thing, because if you click your regular native system, it's not gonna have all the things that you need. So here is the little teal Hyper-V icon manager. So you're gonna open that up. And Hyper-V again is a product for virtualizing with Microsoft. Okay, so this is the manager, and it allows you to control a certain virtual machine. It's kind of like using VMware VirtualBox, but this is Microsoft product. So when you go through this, make sure that you pay attention to all the things. So they have you turn on the settings, click on settings, and then you gotta make sure that you enable the settings. If you don't do these steps, it's not going to be successful throughout. So make sure that we go from the beginning to the end. Okay. So click on settings and then go through. So what this will do is it's going to let you access. Let me show you. So here's the virtual machine, right? If I right click, if I choose settings, let me see if it's not. It says Hyper-V settings, sorry. So silly. Okay, here is like a way that we would look at BIOS on the virtual machine. In VMware, it would say system settings or system manager, right? In the other type of tools. So what you would have is you would see like what is the physical GPU, and so forth. So this allows you to access like the basic input output information for that virtual machine. And the virtual machine is a window, right, that's using software to hold operating system or to access the operating system, which is held in a hard disk space. And here we're using the browser to connect to it. But you can make a virtual machine, right, on your computer or in an external hard drive or even on a USB that would fit. So this allows you to access the input and output of that system. Yeah, I started to see the lag there. So as you go through here, right, it talks about using IDE and looking at IDE and selecting it up and down to see the type of interface you can connect to that hard drive and CD and so forth. So this is just familiarized with how that would look like kind of in the basic input and output information, or UEFI. Okay. And then after you looked at everything, you're going to click start, and it's going to activate that Hyper-V machine. Okay. And in it, what you see is you're going to see Windows 8.1. So what they have is they have the 8.1, and then they're going to have you install it. Okay. I can tell it's 8.1 because it's that purple blue color, right? So when you go through it, and then you're going to go ahead and create the boot to set it up to do the installation. Okay. Okay. So when we get through the step with the installation, right, they give you every screen capture, and it will look very close to this when you do Windows 10 or Windows 8.1 installation, right? At one point, you're going to go ahead and click restart. and then get to the Windows start setup, and then you're going to reconnect it to the virtual machine, and then select your region. So when it tells you to take a screen capture, click that button. Okay, so just follow the step. A lot of it is screenshot. It doesn't take very long, so you can get a little bit of practice with the installation of OS. Okay, so you know what to do when you need to install it for your computer. Okay, and then it shows you how you can create a recovery partition. This is a good practice to do on the drive, kind of like what you did last week when you cloud it, but it shows you how to do that. And then prepare an unattended one. So, okay.
Question about the cloud from the lab last week.
Yes.
I did the lab and I did it with my personal email. And you know, at the very end of the lab, it said backup. So I used my personal email. Does it mean that when I did the backup, I have another copy of my files that I had in my email?
Yeah, so the copy of the system that you were using, their system is on your OneDrive. So when you create a backup and you put it on your OneDrive, right? Yeah, you use your Outlook email. So basically you're taking a backup of their computer, which is, it has very little, and you put it on your OneDrive. So it's not your computer, it's their computer. So yeah, it shows you that when you access your OneDrive, there should, if you didn't remove it or delete it, there should be a backup file on your OneDrive.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So, but you would do that for your computer if you have a large enough cloud drive. Most of the time we don't, because if we're using the free product, it's only like, I think they give you 10 to 15 gig, which doesn't fit. It might not fit the backup file, but if you have a very light system, you can back it up. I recommend it. It's good to have backup on the cloud in the case where if it crashes, you can always go there to pull it. Okay, any question with this? So please complete this by the 22nd, right? By 11:59 on the 22nd. So if you work that day and if you want to take a little bit of time after dinner to finish it, you can. Just be careful, because if you don't have connection or something goes wrong, right? Because the course, they originally set it for 25th, and then now I have to submit it by the 24th. So they're gonna close it by the 23rd. So make sure that you get everything to me after today. Okay, any question? So I'm gonna,
Professor,
yes,
excuse
for
me,
sure.
Professor. I have a question regarding the cloud backup. I could not see the settings that you mentioned.
For the last one,
Mm-hmm.
okay, let me get back to, let me close this and then let me reconnect to the other lab, because they're different ones. Yeah, I think you were clicking in your own windows. The tab that you were asking for it's like at the top, it's gray. Here, let me see. I have to, let me turn off my Windows 10. Because they have you use Windows 8.1, right? I think you were asking about exercise 2. Clicking on lab 4, I'm sorry. So I'm like, why is this the same? Okay. Okay, so here's exercise 2 from last week. It tells you to create the backup to the cloud storage, right? And this one you would use Windows 10. So let me turn off Windows 8.1. I turn on Windows 10. Okay. Then it has you access OneDrive and you logged in. So you got to this part, right, Rochelle?
Yes, Professor. I couldn't see the settings.
Okay. So did you see a little pop-up where it says OneDrive inside that virtual machine?
I haven't noticed, Professor. Yeah.
Okay. So after you successfully logged in and you click sync, right? It's gonna sync their computer to your OneDrive. Okay. Let me see if I can.
I had a similar problem,
Mhm.
and you just have to look at the little arrow and open up the arrow.
Yes.
Sometimes it doesn't automatically show the like the little cloud. You have to open the arrow, and that's where it's gonna be.
Yeah. So the middle arrow, as in this arrow, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm gonna zoom in, Rochelle. I'm gonna point to you. This arrow right here. Okay.
Okay, I see now. Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's gonna pop up like a little note saying, right? If you don't see this, you're gonna click that, and then after that, what you're gonna do is you are going to. It tells you to right click the icon. So once you see the OneDrive icon, the cloud OneDrive, you're gonna right click it and then choose settings.
Thanks,
Okay.
Professor. Yeah. Okay,
Okay.
I'll do it again.
Okay. All right. So that it's just it hides it, right? Good point. Thank you so much. Okay. So you guys heard that. If you don't see the little OneDrive, make sure you click the little arrow to expand the system tray on it, and then to be able to see that, and then you would right click the OneDrive, which is the cloud, and then do the settings. So any other questions? So yes.
Oh, it's not regarding this though. It's regarding the installing a Linux operating system.
Okay.
So my laptop, I just found out that I can't do a boot from an external USB drive. So I am going to wipe the Windows and just install Linux. Is there like the best way to wipe out the Windows operating system to install Linux?
Yeah, if the easiest is the fastest and the easiest is the normal way. Delete the partition and then reformat. But when you do that, you lose all your files on it. Now, like I said, that doesn't really delete all the files. So if you're concerned about that, then you can look at a way that you can sanitize the drive, which is you would zero it all out. But unless it's using for something critical data and stuff, then I would care about that. But yeah, so when you go through the installation process, just select delete the partition that was created for Windows, and then you're going to see unallocated space. And then you can select from that unallocated space to make partition for Linux. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I already did I don't really have to worry about Windows because I did the recovery drive.
Okay.
Right, so I don't need to worry about any files.
Right. So the easiest is to go through the installation process, and in Linux, you can do the same thing, right? There, if you click next, 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 it's gonna do the quick format for you, okay? But there will be one point where it gets to when the option gets to the partition and format, you just make sure that you select advanced, and then, you know, depending on the Linux releases, it would tell you the type of file system. So if you just keep clicking next, it's going to format the whole entire drive for Linux. But if you click advanced and or options, then you can set up, you know, certain section for certain drive and then format it. So most of the Linux would use swap home directory, and, you know, depending on the Linux releases, it would use like ext3 or ext4. The best thing to do is to look at their documentation to see what file system. A lot of times they have the manual on how you can set it up and what partition size ideally is for specific specific directory, or, you know, because you're gonna have to have root and home. The way Linux is that you can have like multiple of its acceptable file system tied to a certain directory inside that OS. So it's, you know, it's varied. Which release are you using?
I don't know. I was thinking about trying Kali Linux.
You can do that. A good one to practice for Red Hat is Fedora. I put Fedora. Fedora Linux, and it gives me the hat. But Fedora Linux is user friendly. It's a great one to use if you want to explore Linux. And it has a lot of the feature similar to Red Hat. You can get the workstation, which is more on the client, and then you can have server. Okay. So if you want to expand on the scale of business, server is a good one to use. But if you want to just start learning Linux, workstation would be best. And then they also have IoT, but on their website, you can go to their wiki and then find information about the project, like documentation on how to install it. Okay.
So
Docs?
would I
Yes.
would I install Kali Linux on top of Fedora?
You can if you create the partition for it. So don't use the whole drive. Use half of it, and then you can use the other half for Linux. But when it goes through the grub process, especially for Kali, it's you gotta. I would tell you to refer to the documentation so that way you can set which one's gonna be priority.
Okay.
Because it's, yeah, otherwise you're only gonna see one. It's gonna write over the other one. So you have to make sure that there's a little edit that you need to do with that.
Okay. Thank
Okay. You're welcome. Any other questions? So if you have submitted all your work, then thank you so much for a good 4 week. I appreciate your attendance and, you know, excitement about this class. If you have not submitted your work, or, you know, not finished, you have until Tuesday to get it done. And then go ahead and complete your lab and your assignments. And hopefully I will see most of you in part B and part C. If not, let me know. I can give you the code if you want to add. That will be networking and security. And you should get the certificate when you complete all 3. Okay. All right. If you have any questions, email me. Okay. Okay. Any question?
Was there any team names that stuck out to you?
Yeah, I saw some really fantastic stuff. Let me go look. I was reading through your answers. Some of you are very funny. Let me see. That was week 1. Let me get to Microsoft Google Form. I mean, Microsoft Form. Okay, so if you finish, I hope you have a wonderful weekend. If you want to stick around for questions, you can. I'm just looking up some information from what you wrote. But try out for the game, and then hopefully I'll see you next week. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. See you next
You're
week.
welcome. Okay, bye.
Bye. Oh, I had a question. If we have a question during like our lab, will you be available for questions through email or something?
Yeah, you can send me a question, or what Rochelle did was she sent me a screenshot of it, which helped me so much because I know exactly where she's at, and she would tell me what exercise she's working on. But if you want to talk to me in person, I have my office hours listed in Canvas, and there will be a Zoom link during that time. That's for all my classes. So, if it's first come, first serve, if you come in and you have to wait a while, it's possibly because I'm helping somebody else, and then I will get to you. But yeah, so if you want to talk to me in person, those are the time that's available. I'm generally Tuesday and Thursday, it's 4 to 5. And then Monday and Wednesday, I do like 11:30 to 1. For because I have some afternoon classes and some night classes, so I try to also make it where they can come and see me before class.
Okay.
But yeah, so that would be helpful.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So let's see responses. Team Inspire, Techie, Technies. Let's see. Yeah, I only have like 3, 4 teams that put in their information. So,
I thought we
and
would hear a little bit more original stuff. I don't know.
well, yeah, I told I guess I kind of scare everybody, and also it's the first day, right? No X-rated names, no,
Yeah.
but yeah, but there was no crazy names. It's just very traditional, I guess. A lot of people pick techies or, you know, but when I did this in the past, people would put like cereal name, like fruit, uh, like what is that?
Like a
There's
series of zeros and ones.
or series of 0 and 1s, or they would put in like food name, or some crazy stuff like that, or they would use like game names. So every time it's also different.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll see you next week.
Okay, see you next week. Bye. Any other questions? Okay, no questions.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you, Professor. Have a
You're
nice weekend.
welcome. Thank you. You too. Enjoy. It's
I
cool
wanted
and
to
down.
ask a question, but my mic was off.
Okay.
My screen all of a sudden just gets like a little black thing when I have a fan next to my desk and I turn it on, and when that happens, it just goes black.
Your screen, the entire screen goes black?
Yeah, and it's just for like a second, and then everything comes back, but it's every single time I turn on the fan.
Oh, there's a short in your electrical system. It could cause from, you using too many connection to your surge protector or your outlet where you're connecting it to. So your computer should never connect directly to an outlet. It should connect to like a surge protector. So go get a good surge protector. And also possibly that it could be a fuse issue or a loose connection from the outlet to the main power or the fuse in the main power. So what happens is, the current in your household is never the same all the time. It could be high and low in various stages. Um, so what happened is when you have a lot of draw, like for example, like I turn on, you know, different appliances in my house all at once, it would, and from that single connection, it could be from the outlet that it pull from the, it draws into the outlet. So it kind of cuts off um, one of the, it cuts off that monitor connection at some point. So that means it depletes from that monitor, but it quickly turns back on. So it resends it back.
Okay.
So there might be some issue with that connection. So what I would recommend is the way you can test this is to get like maybe move it or to get to connect it to a different outlet. All of the same thing, right? Take the fan, the monitor, and everything, plug it into a surge protector, take that surge protector and plug it into another outlet if it's long enough. And if it doesn't do it, then it's that outlet.
Yeah, I have them all connected to that one outlet, but I did just buy a surge protector, so I'll connect it to that because it's directed strictly to the wall.
Yeah. And with the surge protector, what that does is it regulates it, so it stabilizes the current that's coming into the devices. So when you have surge that's really high or surge that are really low, it controls that. Because if you put it into the outlet, sometimes you have it surge high and low. Even though we have it where it's usable, but a lot of the times for our appliances, they want it at a certain voltage. So you want it to be in that range where it's not gonna burn it, right? Surge it, or you know, and with the surge protector, usually they would have a warranty on it. So if you use it within a certain amount of years, if it's still under the warranty, if it destroy your device, you can call them and they will warranty it. But if you know, as you use it over the years, you know you have to replace your surge protector after 5 years. So
Yeah, I didn't know that. I have one connected for my PlayStation and stuff, and I've had it for years, and it says like replace after 5 years, and I'm like, oh, it's been like 10.
well, most people it's okay to use it over time, but after that point, it just becomes an extension. You know, an extension is just to connect more to that outlet, but a surge protector is to regulate the surge. So after a while, what happens is the device that they use to regulate the surge, it gets worn out. And so as it gets worn out, it's no longer effective. So yeah, usually 5 to 7 years is when you should replace it. But yeah, I myself use surge protector longer than what I should have. But you know, also you need to look at the jewel size when you look at surge protector. The higher the jewels, the better.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other
Bye.
question?
I did want to share that recently my 70-inch TV just died. And I'm not sure if it's the T-Con board or the backlight, but I will definitely say that after this class, I mean, it's already a dead TV, so I cracked it open and I ordered a replacement board. Hopefully that's it. I hope it's not the backlight, because at that point I'd be a little lost.
Yeah,
But,
backlight's a little harder to replace and it's more expensive. So you, if it's under warranty, you can, or you can probably find parts from them. But yeah, a lot of the newer TVs, I found that sometimes it would have power supply problem, or yeah, that so good. All right. Ultimately, it is a computer in the back, so you
and
know.
that's what I figured too. So yeah, I'll share next week. The part should be here on Tuesday, so next week I'll know what it may have been.
Put it on YouTube so other people can learn from you.
I'm following somebody else actually, so.
Yeah, I put my stuff on YouTube now. I mean to finish my build and things like that. But you know what? Like that's how you start, right? If you do it, might as well if you record it and you can edit it, just record the whole thing and then edit it and then put it on YouTube so you can share it with people. And other people in the world, they can benefit from what, you know, because that might be that model of TV or you know that brand and that specific things that you have to fix, so that's useful.
Yeah, and based on all the message boards and things I visited, that brand and that model did have an issue with the T-Con board.
Yeah,
So
but if you put that in your video, somebody can like not save so people so much time because you just put it on like that model, fix this. And when people Google it and they're like, oh, wow, okay, I can just look at this guy video. And you never know, you'll be making
that's
money
true.
from YouTube soon, right?
And especially too, because I mean, it was an expensive TV for its size. So this
Oh,
the
yeah.
placement part is just $20. I'll give it a shot, you know, before I
Okay.
invest in another TV.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad. Let me know how it goes.
I
And
will.
then, more power to you. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other question? Okay, good weekend.
You too.
Bye.